Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Create, a series where we take mechanics from games and recreate them in blueprints using Unreal Engine 4. Today we're going to be looking at Megaman and his blaster ability. We're going to be focusing on the charging part of the ability, so shooting single projectiles and being able to charge them, making them bigger, and then shooting them out. If you're new to this series, make sure to check out the description for the Foundation FPS video, which we are building on top of. Okay, let's begin. So a few changes. I just quickly added a different material as I was getting a bit tired of looking at the same old material all the time, and I changed the post-processing a tiny bit, but it's the exact same map, everything's the same, it just looks a little different. This tutorial has a lot of stuff to go through. We have to create materials, we have to create particle systems, we have to set up the blaster, and all of the functionality. So this is going to be a pretty long tutorial. Let's start. First off, let's go to that art folder, go to materials, and let's create the material for the particle system. So let's right click, create a material, and we're going to call this mat underscore particle. And let's open this up. Now we're going to have to get the shape of the particle, which will be a sphere mask, and we'll also need the particle color. So let's right click, type in particle, and you should receive particle color underneath particles. We're going to input this into a multiply node. Two ways you can access this. You can actually just type in multiply. You could find it over here, which will take a while, or you could just press M, hold M down and left click, and you get multiply. Let's drag that in. And let's grab this, drag out here, and let's type in constant, which constant is going to give us a value. We're also going to want to change this material as we want the emissive color and the opacity. In order to get that, we need a translucent blend mode rather than an opaque. And let's make this unlit, because this is more of a personal preference. If you don't want it unlit, you don't have to. Let's chuck this into emissive color, and let's change this to 12. Boom. This is going to control how emissive this is, so just modify this accordingly to what you like. Let's press M, left click, and drag the alpha. Now we need the alpha, of course, for the opacity, and we're going to control the opacity, but we're going to do something a little more complicated than just a constant. Let's make a sphere mask, and this will give it a shape. It's going to give this material a nice shape of a sphere. We're going to drag out from the A and get our texture coordinate, so everything maps correctly. And let's go with B and radius. We're going to use a constant. And this is going to control, put it in here, and let's type in, say, 0.5 and check in opacity and have a look over here. You'll see this. Let's change this to 0.1. It's only covering that much now of this sphere mask, and 1, of course, it just looks like this. So you can modify it to whatever you like. A good value for this tutorial is 0.5. Let's save that. And let's close this off and make our particle. So go back to content, particles, right click, and particle system, P underscore, this will be the blaster effect. And this is going to be the trail effect for our blaster that will shoot, that you most likely saw in the preview at the start of this video. You'll see by default it has this kind of crosshair. If you click on required, you'll see this default particle. It's cool, but it's not what we want. So let's change this, and let's type in that mat underscore particle, and give it a moment to compile the shaders, and you'll get this nice effect. This is what we want. This is why we did that sphere mask. It looks great, and you can use this for so many things, but for today, we're going to use it for our effect. As you can probably imagine, you could use this for fire and stuff. First of all, let's change the lifetime. So minimum, let's make it 0.5 and maximum 0.8. This gives a bit of variety to the particles. Some will go a bit higher, some will die off sooner. It's just for variety's sake. The initial size down here, let's change this to 80, 80, 80 across the max. And for the minimum, 60 to 70 is fine. Let's change this to 70. And now they'll spawn between these two variants. If you want a bigger, larger variety, you can just extend the max and the minimum. But this is good for now. Next off, we want to change the color. Now, color over lifetime will change it depending on how long it's lived for, and it will change it halfway through or whatever we decide. Let's get rid of this. We just want the initial color, and luckily, if you just type in color, or not type in color, go down to color, you'll see initial color, and we can easily, if you click down on distribution under start color, change the constant, and we can make this a greenish color, something like that. Next, we want to change the size over lifetime. You see it's kind of one consistent size, and it doesn't look right. It looks like they're disappearing at the top. We want them to fade out really nicely. To do this, let's right click, go to life, where's that at? Size, go to size by life, and mine's already open, just minimize this for you. You'll see life multiplier, you open that up, you go to distribution, and constant curve. It will have two array elements, and that is 2 points. Point 0 is the start. You'll notice if I make this 0.3, they start off small. But that's not the effect we're after. We want them to become small at the top, which is at the end of their lifetime, so make that 0, and you'll see they die off at the top. And if you go to initial velocity and you just increase the Z, you could have like something like this, some kind of fire going. But we actually don't want any velocity, so let's delete velocity. We want it to stay in one place because this is going to sit inside of the projectile, and the projectile is going to move, and then from it moving, it'll create the trail for us. So let's save that, and we're done with this particle system. So let's close that off, and let's go into content, blueprints, and let's create screen shake. So in order to use screen shake, instead of us manually doing it, Unreal has a great system. So let's go into our blueprints folder, right click, and create a blueprint class. Now blueprints isn't up here. You have to first access all classes by clicking on here. Then in search, let's type in camera shake, and then you'll get access to camera shake. Select, we can call this BP underscore camera shake, and open this up. I just called it BP because it's consistent with everything else we're doing. Now, luckily, you don't have to create any functionality. All we have to worry about is everything over here. The best way to learn about all this stuff is through experimentation, but I will describe things as best as I can, and I'm just minimizing these so it looks like your version. First of all, we just want this to shake in a single instance, so let's make this a single instant shake. The duration is the time it shakes for. Let's try something like 0.3 for now. 0.5 is probably really nice as well, but these are the settings that I have written down. We're going to go to rotation, and this is going to rotate the camera. We want to focus on the pitch and yaw, not the roll. So let's go to pitch and make this 5 and 35 for frequency. Then, of course, 5, and you can do 35 or 30, whatever you like. Of course, you can just completely change these settings. It doesn't matter. You'll just get a lot more screen shake than this if you do higher, and of course, if you do lower, you'll get less screen shake. Let's get rid of rotation oscillation, go to location, and we want to focus on the X and the Z. Let's go to the X and make it 100, and we're just going to do this once. If you do it for a longer frequency, it could get very jarring, but once again, up to experimentation, and then 10 and 50 on the Z. These are some good default settings, and I really recommend everyone messes around with these to figure out what they prefer. So let's close that off, and let's create the last few materials we need. So if you notice, we're doing all the setup required for this project. So right click, go to material, matte underscore blaster projectile, and this color is going to be green. So let's get a constant 3 vector. We're going to click here, make this green, because remember the particles are going to be coming out of this, so we want a green color. And let's plug that into base color, hold M, left click, drag that into A, B, of course, once again, you want a constant to control the amount, and let's make this something like 12. And we can just plug that into emissive color, save that, and once it's done, we can close this off. Right click, material, matte underscore blaster weapon. This time around, we just want a nice blue color. This is the gun arm that Megaman has. So right click, constant 3 vector, And let's plug that into base color. We don't want this to be emissive, we just want a simple base color. Click on constant, and let's get a nice blue. It's a bit too... something like that. If you wanted this to be reflective, you could make constants of specular, metallic, and roughness, but for now, I'm just going to leave it a very plain, boring blue. The last particle material, I should say, we have to create. So, material. This is the mat underscore blaster weapon decoration. If you're wondering what the hell this is the attachment on the side of the gun that Megaman has, that kind of little yellow thing. So let's just add a very simple emissive color, because the yellow here, it doesn't look very nice unless you do this. But maybe you can figure out a better way, but constant 3 vector, chuck this into emissive, make this yellow, something like this. By the way, with any of these values, if you want to do what I'm doing exactly, you can just steal one of these values and it should translate into your, see these two values here? If you just type those in, it should translate directly into your Unreal. Let's hit OK. And the last thing we want to do is left click anywhere. Let's make this unlit, just because it looks nicer. Save that and close this off. Now we can actually get into some blueprints. So first of all, let's create the projectile. Last lesson, we made everything a lot neater, so let's go into interactive BP. Right click, and blueprint class. We're going to have an actor. And this is going to be the BP underscore blaster projectile. Open this up, and let's get a few things going. So first of all, let's have a sphere. Let's scale this sphere down to 0.3 because it's just a bit big for now. And the material, well, we created some before, so mat underscore, and let's grab the projectile material, which should be this nice green glowing one, unless you want a different color, of course. And we need the particle system, so let's go and type in particle system, and we should be able to assign it here. So you type in particle system, let's call this blaster effect, grab a template, and we'll just type in P underscore blaster effect. There it is. I'll drag this out really quickly, and you'll see it here. So I'm going to zero this out again. And make sure it's a child of the sphere. We can rename this if you like. This can be the blaster mesh, whatever you like to call it. Or the projectile mesh, I should say. Projectile. Okay, last component, let's add in our projectile movement. So projectile movement, if you have never used this before, this is something that you can add into projectiles and they will automatically move forward, which is amazing, and it has a bunch of other functionality. So initial speed, 1000, and max speed, let's just do 1000. This will control whether it's faster or slower. Obviously, the higher the value, the faster it goes. Let's leave these here. We do not want gravity or else our bullet is going to fall. Our projectile will fall. So make that 0. Velocity, make sure that's always at 1 on X or else it won't fly. And the last thing we need is disable auto activate. You will see why when we create the blueprint. We want this to activate once it's charged up or been shot out. Once it's been shot out, then this projectile can activate. When we're charging it up, we want to scale it up and then shoot it. So let's leave auto activate unticked. And now we can get into Megaman. So let's close that off, go into blueprints. Let's go to BP characters, go to our FPS default character. We cleaned this up last lesson once again, so you might have a different name for this. Right click, duplicate. By the way, if you're following along just with an FPS template and you didn't watch the tutorial, you can basically duplicate the FPS template character and just remove all the guns and follow along. So let's duplicate that. BP underscore Megaman. Open it up. Our default stuff's in here. That's great. Go to viewport. Now we're going to create the blaster out of some primitives. So let's hopefully make this look good. Add component. Let's add a sphere and give it that mat underscore blaster weapon, which should be the boring blue. Drag it out. Disable these for now, the scale snapping and the movement snapping, because it's going to make this a lot easier to mold. Let's press R for scale and scale this down a bit. We're going to scale this out. We're just trying to resemble the blaster arm. We can, of course, modify this later and make it better. Let's call this the blaster arm. Whoops, there we go. And let's press Alt-W, which will duplicate it, bring it out. R, scale it in a bit. This is going to be the front where the bullets come out of. So let's just scale that down a little bit more. And that's looking good. Okay. Drag that under blaster arm. Then we need the side decorations. So let's create a cube. And let's scale this cube down. Move it over here. Scale it down a bit more this way. And let's bring it down like that and down like this. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We're going to go over here, mat underscore, let's get that weapon decoration. And you'll see it's got that, now it's got the side thing I was discussing earlier. So we can just bring this in a little bit. Alt-W once again, bring this over here. And you just want it so it's not clipping. And what I mean by that is, if you notice, if I bring that in a bit, it's clipping. Let's just not do that. Okay, now this blaster arm is one whole unit. Awesome. We're going to create a scene components. This is going to be the projectile spawn location. And we will set this up in a moment. I'm just going to move it over here for now. So keep this in mind for later. Let's get the blaster arm. Maybe we should move it up a little bit. We'll see when we test it in game. We want this to be a child of the camera, but before we do that, we want to create another spring arm. So add component. Actually, before you do that, just left click here, because if you have something selected and you add a component, it usually childs it. So left click just on this gray space, add component, spring arm, and let's just call this the blaster arm controller, and make the blaster arm a child of it. And you'll see it disappears. That's simply because it went 300 units due to the target arm length. So let's make that 0. And a few other things we might want to do here are, let's enable camera lag and camera rotation. And this is going to be awesome. This is going to allow the weapon to have a bit of lag. It'll give it weapon sway. This is the really quick and dirty way to do weapon sway, especially in a game jam. And if you modify this enough, it kind of looks pretty good. I'm happy with it usually. So we got our blaster arm controller. We got our blaster arm. Let's zero this out, and then we can move this blaster arm controller into place. I just like to work with things when they're in proper locations. So let's move that there, and let's make this a child now of the camera. Compile and save. Let's see how this looks in the game. So minimize this. Remember, we have to go to blueprints, FPS game mode, and we have to change the default pawn class from Widowmaker if you followed last lesson. Let's change it to BP underscore Megaman, or BP underscore Megaman. Compile and save that, close that off. And we should be able to hit play. F11 full for a full screen, and you'll see it's got the sway, except it's a bit too close, unfortunately, but it looks good. So let's bring this back up. And let's drag this out a little bit. Compile and save. This is just going to be a bit of testing. Awesome, this looks great. So now I've got this weapon say. So if you change that lag reduction values and stuff, it'll look really cool depending on what you want. So yeah, it's a really nice little trick. I really like it quite a bit. I'm going to leave mine like this for now, and I'll make it look a bit better later. I might move it to the right a little bit. It's bugging me a little bit. Let's just move it. All right, that's looking good. Awesome. Okay. Save that. Let's go back in. Okay, let's go and make sure the projectile spawn location is in the right place. Make this a child of the camera for now. So we should be able to minimize that. And we're going to put this somewhere in front of this gun. So let's have a look here. I'm going to drag this forward to about 130 just for now. You might be wondering, why isn't it directly in front? We're going to be scaling the projectile up, kind of like a balloon, and it will engulf this entire gun, and it won't look right. So we're just going to leave it here for now. Compile and save that. So here is our setup. We have the spring arm for the camera, which we made a long time ago. Then we have our spring arm for the blaster, and the projectile spawn location is a child of the camera. Now let's get into all the functionality. Event graph, come down here, let's make a custom event. This is going to be great to call later. We're going to call this charge projectile. Whoops, charge projectile. And let's drag this out. Create spawn actor, whoops, spawn actor from class. We are going to be spawning our BP underscore projectile, blaster projectile. We need a transform location. Now, I did something a bit different here, and this is just because I had problems setting the rotation later, but right now, right click here, split split struct pin, and you'll get these three values. Grab the spawn location, and we want to get the world location. And then we want to get the get rotation. And we just want to leave the spawn transform scale as is. From here, we need to attach this component that we spawned as a child of the camera. That way it can move around when we move our view. If we don't, it kind of just sits there and it looks really awkward when you move around and move your mouse. So before we do that, we need to set this as a variable because we're going to call this later. And so we don't get any errors or non-valid responses from Unreal, we're going to right click, promote to variable, and we're going to call this our projectile. And now we can call this whenever we want, which is great. Let's drag here and type attach to component. And the target is going to be the projectile. The parent is going to be the projectile spawn location, so let's get that and chuck it in here. This will make the projectile a child of the spawn location, so when you look around, it stays here, and then when you shoot it off, we're going to detach it, and it will go flying. Okay, next up, oh, and make sure we keep it world and not relative, or else all the scale and rotation and the location are going to get messed up. Now we're going to create a timeline, so right click, add timeline, and we're going to call this the charge blaster. We're going to plug in over here, play from start, and then we're going to create a custom track. So traditionally we just kind of use update and let it do its thing. However, we want it to update at a very set rate. So let's double click in here. And let's add in a event track. We're going to make the length 0.05. So let's click in here, 0.05. We're going to call this event track, rename it to our charge blaster track. Oh, just charge. Charge should be good. Let me name that properly. And to see what this did, go to event graph. Now you have this here. And for this to actually work, we need to just create a key float. And it doesn't really matter what we do with this. So let's just make the time 0 and the value 0. I found that I needed this in order for this track to work. What really matters is this length up here. So and I will show you exactly what this does. If you leave this higher, it will charge it faster. Slower. Yeah, I think slower. If you make this lower, it will charge it faster and it will make it smoother. And you'll see what I mean. It's because we're going to lerp the scale and you'll see what I mean soon. So, okay, we got charge. Let's do something with it. Let's drag out and make a branch. And what are we doing here? Well, when we charge our weapon, and we're going to hold left click and we're going to charge our weapon, we need to store the amount of time we charged it for. The best data type for that is a float. So let's type in charge time. So click here, make a new variable, type in charge time, and we do not want a boolean, we want a float. Let's grab this, get this, and we're going to check if this is less than 10, and drag it into here. If you want to charge your projectile to be bigger, you can increase this value. If you want it to be smaller, you can decrease this value. I found 10 to be quite nice. Same goes for this over here. We're going to click type in plus, add a float, and we're going to make it 0.5. This is how fast the charge timer will charge up, because we're actually going to set the charge time. And when are we going to set it? When this is true, when it is less than 10. So if you want to modify this, you can make it charge faster or slower. And the next thing is we need to affect our scale. So remember before we made this projectile? Well, it's going to come in handy now. So let's get that. And let's set actor scale. Oops, set actor scale 3D. We're going to plug in charge time into here. And now we need to figure out, well, what is the scale? To get the scale, we're going to make a lerp. So type in lerp, vector, and it takes an A and a B. A is what is it going from? And B is what is it going to? We're going from the projectiles, get actor scale 3D. So we're going from here. And, well, what are we going to increase to? Charge time. This is the one we need, so let's grab charge time. And let's just chuck this into B, and it will automatically do the conversion for you. For the alpha, I just set this to 0.1, that's quite nice, and chuck this return value into here. Now this projectile will scale, so let's compile and save that. And this is the beginning of this. We're going to come back to this later, but for now, we can move on to the next thing. Let's actually just quickly highlight all this, left click and drag, press C. We'll call this charge projectile. Next step, let's move into shooting it. So right click, once again, custom event, and we're going to call this shoot projectile. Let's zoom in a bit. And first of all, we need to, when we shoot it, remember we attached it. Well, we need to detach it. So grab the projectile from down here, get, type in detach, detach from actor, and drag in here. It's just going to detach from whatever it's attached to. We're going to, of course, keep this world, and drag over here. We're going to drag up here, and we're going to get projectile movement. And then over here, we're going to drag out from projectile. We're going to get P blaster. So what do we call it? Get blaster. We need to get that particle system. I had this one. This is it. Get blaster effect. This is the particle system. And we need to set it to visible. So set visibility. Drag out here. And this is that particle system. So when we detach it and it flies forward, we're going to set this to visible with new visibility. The other thing we want to actually do is, so let's make this a bit neater over here, double click, drag this down and drag this down here. We want to set the velocity of the projectile movement. So let's drag here and set velocity. The reason why we need to set this, drag here and drag this into that node. And we can of course double click and make this a bit neater. Okay, so the reason, oh, we could actually just, let me delete that, bring this over more. Okay, the reason why we need to set velocity is because we want it to shoot from the forward vector of the first person camera. So let's get our camera. Let's get the forward vector, and let's times this by an amount. Whatever you times this by is the speed it will shoot at. 2000 is a good start value. Just going to drag these out. And that is it for the start of this. Now that we have all this, remember there is one extra thing we need to do, and that is to actually set the visibility. We need to activate the component. So let's drag out and type in activate projectile movement, drag this down here, and drag this into here. And that is it. We can make this a bit neater, so I'm going to drag over here, double click here, drag this into target, and now it looks a bit better. Awesome, let's save that, compile, drag here, comment, shoot projectile. Now there is another thing missing, and that's actually, well, we need to stop charging at some point. And this one is quite simple. So if we just bring this over here, we can make a custom event, stop charging, and from here we can just drag out. We need to set the charge time to 0, because imagine this as a reset. So if we don't reset this charge time, it's going to always be at the maximum charge time and just shoot automatically at the biggest scale because we're scaling it up. To stop charging, we need to plug this into stop. And one thing we forgot to do here, I forgot to do, is double click. We need to make this a loop. So by looping it, it will loop through until one of these conditions is met. And this is how we stop it. We stop it here. So we just highlight C, stop charging. And well, where do we call this? We need to call it after we've shot the projectile. So drag out here, stop charging. Awesome. We need to do another thing, which is, well, we're not actually shooting the projectile at this point. The way that we can shoot the projectile is over here. So let's make this a bit wider. Drag this out. We're going to drag down from false, shoot projectile event, and this is where that screen shake comes in that we made earlier. So drag out here, play world, camera shake. And let's just drag this down, make this a bit bigger. Awesome. We're going to select the class BP underscore camera shake. The center of the blast, well, let's just get our actor components, so actor location. And the outer radius, this is, so if this is at 0, it won't affect our camera. The camera needs to be within the radius. 500 is a safe number. We're very close to the center of the actor, so 500 should be more than enough. Okay, I'm just going to drag this back and let's see what I can do here. That should be good. All right, let's compile and save. So if all things go well, we should be able to shoot our projectile. So let's try this out. Oh, one more other thing, most important thing. One of the most important things, we need to get receive input. So right click, left mouse button. When we press to charge projectile, and when we release, shoot projectile. This is going to shoot it like this, press C, and we'll call this shooting input. Now you might be wondering, why do we have a shoot projectile here and over here? This shoot projectile is for when we haven't fully charged up. You'll see here, we charge and we scale it. But if you let go before this is greater than 10, it will just shoot your projectile at that size like this. If you hold it and it goes above 10, it will be at maximum size and then it's going to shoot, and we want a camera shake to show how powerful that final projectile is. So let's compile and save that. And let's test this out. So I'm going to press play, left click, and there we go, we got the shooting. Hold left click, it scales and shoot. Hold left click, scale and shoot. This is awesome. And there's that shake. When you hold it down, boom. And that's it. This is the charging. So you hold left click, boom. And this is from that timeline event. So let me show you all something. If we go back to that timeline, let's double click here. Let's make this 0.01. Compile and save. Hit play. See how fast that charges up? That is why we have the 0.03 value. If you do 2.5, oh, just 2. Let's see how that looks. So 0.3, this gives you control, because if you have it 0.1, it's way too hard to figure out when is it charging up. But at 0.3, I have time to figure out, well, what value do I want? And of course, if you just left click, it just shoots them out. And you can hold and boom. Now you'll notice before I said, if you have that shoot location too close, see it? It's just taking over that gun. So let's actually just change this and drag the projectile spawn location to about 160. And hopefully this doesn't look too ridiculous. There we go. And I'm actually going to just bring my gun out a little bit. So I'm just going to grab the blaster arm and the projectile spawn and just move it out a tiny bit. Alt P. There we go. Awesome. That's how we do it. Because we set the rotation properly and we're attaching and detaching from the parent, it can move around with the gun properly. That is why we did all of that work. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. There was a lot to cover and a lot that we went through. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the Megaman Let's Create. If you did enjoy this video, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel for similar content, and if you would like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon. Patreon allows me to create more content more frequently and of higher quality. If you have any friends who are into Unreal Engine 4, you can share this video with them as well. That would be a great help. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video.